Major funding for this program has been provided by Ghana Airways.
Ghana Airways.
For almost 40 years, Ghana Airways has been linking West Africa to the rest of the world. Your number one choice to West Africa.
Additional funding provided by Starlight Cleaners, taking care of you and your whole family. And Ascenta newspaper, bringing you community news both home and abroad. If it's about Africa, you can trust Ascenta. Hello, good evening, and welcome to Talk New York. One of the most important decisions New York City residents must make this year is to choose a new borough president. It is fair to suggest that the mayoral race has somewhat overshadowed the borough president race. But we must remember that come November, we will be choosing a borough president who will lead us into the new millennium. Thanks to the power of the media, it is fair to suggest that we may be familiar with the faces of the candidate, but most of us hardly know what they stand for. More often than not, we are bombarded with headlines and political rhetoric. But think about it. Wouldn't you like to make an informed decision come election day? This program is not a political endorsement, but a fulfillment of Talk New York's commitment to continuing coverage of the political process in New York City, so that you can make an informed decision come election day. One of the candidates for Manhattan Borough President is Councilwoman C. Virginia Fields, who is currently serving her second full term as a member of New York City Council, representing Central Harlem, Morningside Heights, and parts of the Upper West Side and East Harlem. Tonight, I am honored to welcome Councilwoman C. Virginia Fields to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
That was a mouthful. Who is Virginia Fields?
Well, first of all, let me thank you for inviting me, and I agree with you that this is a very important decision that voters will be making this year, and it is the primary, of course, that Democrats will be voting, because I am a Democrat running as a Democrat, and that, of course, will be primary day on September 9th. I come to the position of running for borough president based on a number of years of very active public service, having been a member of the City Council now for the past 8 years, as you accurately stated, representing Central Harlem, the Upper West Side, and a part of East Harlem. And during that 8-year period, I have gained significant experience, a track record, and accomplishments in working through the City Council. So I understand city government. I know how city government works, how to get things done. So I'm running for the office of borough president based on that track record, those experiences, and the kinds of things that I've been able to accomplish. Prior to joining or running for public office, I also served as a member of a local community board for 7 years, and I was chair of that board for 2 of those 7 years. And I mentioned that because that's a very important way to be on the ground running, so to speak, to understand communities, needs of communities, working through a variety of differences that exist within any community in terms of getting things done. And I know how to make that happen. So my experiences, I believe, have prepared me to take on this job. As a borough president, I would be the chief spokesperson for the borough. A borough president is in a position to establish priorities for the borough across a variety of lines, to advocate on behalf of neighborhoods, on behalf of needs of people, and to establish where we are going and how we are going to get there as a group of people, very diverse people throughout the borough. So I would be a spokesperson in helping to establish establish much of that. I think it is especially an important time given what we're seeing in terms of cutbacks by federal government in so many of the areas of programs and services that have benefited communities and benefited people. Without that, what do? How do we create more small businesses so that they in turn can create jobs for people in a community as well as beyond? How can we better improve the education system so that we can ensure that our young people will have the best public education that they possibly can receive? And how do we move further to improve the quality of life, not only just in terms of the reduction of crime, but also continuing to provide for decent, affordable housing, clean streets, safe parks, open parks, clean parks, and things that make living in any community good, and that all of our communities have a chance to do that. So all of these kinds of things are possible for me as a borough president to address, and I believe that I will be able to address it from a perspective of knowledge, understanding of city government, having worked in city government, knowing how to get things done and be effective in that office.
Okay. You co-sponsored the Civilian Complaint Review Board. Get that right. And basically tell us a little bit what that means, actually, for the person who doesn't know what that means.
Yeah, as a member of the City Council, I was one of the prime sponsors in helping to develop the language and ultimately working to get the Civilian Complaint Review Board passed.
I don't mean to cut you, but you just said you were one of the people who developed the language.
Right.
It's also said in your bio that you are a full-time legislator. Yes. What does that mean?
It means I do not have another job. I work at this 7 days a week,
Right.
24 hours a day,
Okay.
literally. And it's interesting that you point that out, because the city government is governed by what we call our city charter. And in that charter, it spells out the various positions and the responsibilities. And the City Council, as defined by the City Charter, is a part-time position. But there is no way, given the awesome responsibilities of a council member and within my own district needs related to health care, related to development, related to quality of life, related to city services, there is absolutely no way that I could function as a part-time legislator, so I am indeed a full-time legislator. With respect to the Civilian Complaint Review Board, that was one of the pieces of legislation that I was key in terms of the prime sponsor. And it was developed to establish an independent arm for reviewing and deciding on issues of police brutality that were reported by citizens of the city. And it establish independent investigators and people who are appointed to the board by the mayor, by members of the city council, to be able to review those complaints and make recommendations in terms of the outcome of what should actually happen with a case as it comes before the Civilian Complaint Review Board. There have been criticisms all along, of course, by having the police itself, and prior to the independent Civilian Complaint Review Board, that was in fact the case. When a complaint of police brutality was made, you had the police reviewing that and making the decision. So this established independent bodies of the police officers and independent investigators reviewing this. So that is what it was intended to do. I've been disappointed in terms of how it has actually worked, because at no time since the establishment of that legislation has any mayor fully funded that CCRB, Civilian Complaint Review Board, to the extent that it has been allowed to function based on what it is we envision. The legislation was established during the time of Mayor Dinkins, and he was very instrumental in helping us pass that, because it was his office that we really sat down and, established all of the criteria. But it has never been fully funded, and over the past 3 years or so, it has even been further reduced. So it doesn't allow the staff nor the investigators to do the kind of job that I believe that they could do and make a difference.
How was complaints supposed to get to them? Is it through the person who is brutalized or some other channel?
Essentially, that's it. If you're a victim of police brutality or any forms of behavior that you believe are unbecoming or inappropriate of a police officer, you can file a complaint
with them,
with the Civilian Complaint Review Board. Yes. So therefore, you would file it directly. Others can certainly encourage you, but ultimately, as the victim, you are expected to file the complaint. And in an effort to help people understand more about it, there have been forums held throughout the city so that citizens would know about the CCRB and how to file a complaint. So while at a time when we are told that there is a reduction in the number of police brutality cases, I think that certainly in the African American and Latino communities, we still see far too many of those reports. And because it has not been funded sufficiently to allow it to be as independent and as effective as I believe it can be, you see a reduction in terms of the number of complaints, legitimate complaints that probably should be made at the CCRB. But that was one of the important initiatives that I led as a member of the City Council, and I've been most active as it relates to housing issues. I've been very supportive of fighting for tenant rights and supported the maintaining of the rent regulations throughout over the past couple of months, during the 6 months or so.
Was it a good deal
that we ultimately ended up with? Well, we're still having to determine what got voted.
Okay. Right.
Now that the legislation is available, a number of people are still analyzing it, and from some of the tenant advocates, they are saying that it's not as good as we thought. But of course, maintaining the rent regulations, not having them changed, I think is extremely important. There is a point in there, a component, however, that bill that calls for what is known as mandatory rent deposit that a number of people were concerned about, and apparently that got passed under or through this rent regulation, which would require tenants to deposit their rent during the time that they're attempting to negotiate complaints through the housing court as it relates to their apartment. So we're still looking at that in terms of the impact that could have. So we're analyzing it, as so many other people are, in terms of what we actually got out of this, but under no circumstances, in my view, should rent regulations have been eliminated because of what it means for so many people. But my work in housing has been to help create more units of affordable housing, not only in my own district, but throughout the city, because as a member of the council, I serve as a member of the Land Use Committee, where we review and have input in terms of development within the city. And that's an important role of a borough president. A borough president is responsible for land use decisions within their borough. They are responsible for appointing a person to the Board of Education, and as I said, education would be the top priority within my administration. And they make a number of other important appointments, like to the City Planning Commission, which is very much related to land use and development. So all of the kinds of decisions that a borough president is mandated to do, those are the experiences and my knowledge of those responsibilities as I have worked on them and really learned my own understanding and knowledge of that through my present role as a council member.
Okay. I read your bio and I've noticed that you were a committee member of a number of things. However, and also you are the first black woman elected to the city council in the city.
From Manhattan.
From Manhattan,
right.
Okay, I use the city for Manhattan, but
that's why so many people do
right, we're trying to
thing.
claim New York for ourselves, all Manhattan. But anyway, but this election or this campaign year has Focus on negative things, if you will, things that are not relevant. For instance, your opponent, Deborah Glick, is a lesbian. I just saw an article on the internet. Actually, it wasn't about you two, so I'm paraphrasing this, and it's from the New York Times. And it speaks to the fact that, the borough president office has come down between Virginia Fields, who is a black woman, councilwoman, and Deborah Glick, who is a lesbian. Does it matter?
No. In my view, it certainly should not matter in terms of a person's race or sexual orientation in this instance. I think what's important, and ultimately the voters decide, qualifications, experience. What is the experience that a person has for that job? And my running for the office, I'm certainly campaigning on that basis. What are my experiences? A track record, my accomplishments for the job of borough president. And I know that I am qualified and believe that I am the best qualified candidate of everyone who's running, again, based on those factors. And that is what I certainly encourage voters to look at and ultimately make that decision. And certainly should not be judged on the basis of my race or Deborah Glick's sexual orientation.
Right. Hopefully this campaign year we hear more about the issues, putting food on the table. That's what matters to a lot of people.
And there are some very important issues in Manhattan, as it is throughout the city and the country. For example, with welfare reform, as a result of that, over the next 4 years or so, we will begin to see people drop from public assistance role because of the time limit component of the welfare reform legislation. What does that mean for the people in Manhattan who will no longer be able to receive public assistance and yet do not have jobs, because there is no job creation or job component to the welfare reform?
Actually advocating workfare. Are there any jobs out there in city government or anywhere else for these people?
Well, workfare is, a program that is under the jurisdiction of the city, but we have a number of problems with workfare because it is not training welfare recipients to move from that experience to actual jobs. We have quite a bit of data that shows the length of time that some of the welfare recipients have been on these jobs, and they are not moving up in terms of higher responsibilities, more responsibilities, or moving into permanent position. So we cannot institutionalize work experience program. That is not the answer. And in many instances, it also shows that they are filling vacancies of jobs that have either city workers left because of the severance pay that they took, or because we have not filled the jobs due to budgetary problems, and welfare recipients are filling those jobs. So you can't, and we should not be substituting in that way. We need to look at how do we create real jobs for real people and provide real training to make that happen. Let's look at some of the major industries here in New York City. We have the technology, Silicon Alley, where everyone is excited, and I think it's something to really be excited about. But what we see, many of those jobs are at the high end in terms of skills and training and knowledge of technology. That's not going to help the majority of the population who receive public assistance.
Unless they get training.
Exactly. Let's look at tourism. Now tourism is really booming, and that's good. And a lot of that is related to the fact that we have reduced the hotel occupancy rate, and we have done some other things to promote businesses to really thrive in the city. That's good. But too much of our tourism still centers within mid-Manhattan. Let's think of ways by which we can push tourism out in the other neighborhoods throughout Manhattan and get a focus, and that can help to create some jobs at other ends of the tourism trade, looking at the retail industry. What are some of the related responsibilities within the retail industry, like people who sew, people who do all kinds of activities as it related to the garment industry? What kind of training? Because those are the areas that are showing real growth. So I think one of the things that we need to focus on more clearly is what are the areas of real job growth, the industries, and what are the related responsibilities or jobs that might not be at the top level for which we can provide training for a large number of people to fulfill. And that's a focus of which we're already working on and hope to be able to lead Manhattan into the next century with a much more progressive way of trying to create jobs, helping people at the level that they are, while at the same time doing all that we can to help improve the education of young people who are coming along now so that they can be better prepared to meet the job market over the next 4 and 5 and years, into the future.
Okay. We spoke a little bit about the police, but let's talk about public safety. Is crime up or down?
Well, based on all the statistics, it's down. Based on what you ask people, they feel safer. So, and I have no reason to doubt the statistics as they are reported, that crime is down in the majority of the major categories throughout the city. And that's good, and I think we should all be happy about that. I think that we can all
There's
agree.
been a problem. Who should benefit from that? Who should take the credit?
Well, and I think someone told me a long time ago that, we can get so much done if it didn't matter who gets credit for it. So, but that's not the case. I know that has been a debate, and I think that we certainly saw the move toward reduction of crime during the development of the Safe Streets, Safe City program, which was put in place under former Mayor David Dinkins. The funding for that and the legislation passed occurred during that time, and I think that...
Which you backed, actually.
Absolutely, I backed, and that we can all agree that is the road that started us down the road for the reduction of crime, of which we are continuing to see. So with that in place, which put more police officers on the street, it also helped to fund after-school programs known as the Beacon Schools for many areas where crime was high, as well as intergenerational programs. So that started us down the road. The City Council, working with Mayor Dinkins, put that in place. That has been continued under Mayor Giuliani, and using that program and the resources and the police force, building on that and bringing in other initiatives, have all helped toward the reduction of crime. So everybody gets the credit, including community groups that have block watches and various activities within the community where they are much more organized in terms of crime watching, fighting drugs, reporting drugs, and being very vigilant in the community. So everyone gets credit, and as long as we all keep working toward the same goal, we all benefit.
Police brutality. There are a lot of people who say that police officers should live where they police so that they can understand the community and, make better decisions and so on and so forth, and they could eliminate some of the problems. There are other people who say that, well, if that happens, there will be corruption. If that police officer is living next door to that drug dealer, he probably will not arrest that person. What is your opinion on that?
Well, I think that it sells policemen short if one says that they will be more prone to corruption if they live in the community in which they work, or they will be unduly influenced if they live in a block and drug dealers live in the block. I think it's very unfair to the character and to the integrity of police officers. I support residency requirements because I think that there is much to be gained by having police officers live in the city. And they might not necessarily live in the same community where they work, but living in the city where you experience the good, the bad, the not so good, the not so bad, from where you live daily, I believe makes a difference. If you're driving into the city only to police this group of people,
Would they changing the composition of the police force, would that make a difference?
Would it make a difference in terms? Well, residency requirement will change the composition of the police force in terms of city residents, because you look at who lives in the city.
We hear that a white police officer brutalized a black person. If all police officers were black, would that make a difference?
No, I don't think it works that way, and I don't think we live in a society where all of any one race should only be related to any profession. So I don't believe that, nor do I support that notion. I think we are a very diverse society along racial, religious, and ethnic lines, and that all of the jobs and the activities should so reflect that, and that should not be any different for the police department. However, if you had a residency requirement, that would change the makeup of the police department in terms of who lives in the city. You have a much more diverse population in the city than is reflected by the police department. So a residency requirement would automatically change that. That's a state issue. It is necessary for the state legislature to pass legislation in order to implement that. But I think that it has a great deal of validity, and I support a residency requirement.
We're almost out of time, and I am so glad you came. And
I am too.
So I'll invite you again on the air to come back anytime you want. But why should anybody choose you over anybody else? Why is Virginia Fields the best candidate?
Again, I would bring to the office of Manhattan Borough President knowledge of the job, qualifications related to that particular office, accomplishments, track record, and experience. And I think that all of those are important qualifications related to anything that one, moves to do. I have done a lot of the necessary work related to the office of Manhattan Borough President. And I think that when we have qualified people who have all of what we look for and ready to move to the next point, let's do it.
Okay.
I am the only candidate in this race who has been in city government as an elected official for the length of time that I have. And I am the only candidate in this race who has been a part of a process related to the borough president, meaning community boards, as it relates to the activities there. Okay. I'm the only candidate who can say that.
Okay.
And so I'm ready, and I start at a point of readiness in terms of getting this job done far beyond any other candidate in the race.
On that note, I would like to thank you very much for spending this time with me. I hope this program has given you a little more information about Miss Virginia Fields and has educated you about the political process. For the minority community, please remember the civil rights movement earned you your right to vote. Do not forget that people pay the ultimate price to earn you that vote. So please don't take it for granted. The only way your views will be adequately represented is if you exercise your right to vote. This is Yaa Agyemang Okoampa-Ahoofe. Thank you for watching. Good night. Major funding for this program has been provided by Ghana Airways.
Ghana Airways.
For almost 40 years, Ghana Airways has been linking West Africa to the rest of the world. Your number one choice to West Africa.
Additional funding provided by Starlight Cleaners, taking care of you and your whole family. And Ascenta newspaper, bringing you community news both home and abroad. If it's about Africa, you can trust Ascenta.